The massive alien ship floated helplessly in the darkness of space like a dying whale. The Star Whisper had once been beautiful, with its crystal-like walls that sparkled like diamonds. But now those same walls were growing dim and cold. Inside the ship, Captain Thyra was barely alive. Her flower-like body was wilting, and her bright green petals were turning brown at the edges. Thyra belonged to a race called the Vectoran. They looked like walking trees with faces, and they were some of the most peaceful creatures in the galaxy. They never fought wars or hurt anyone. They spent their time studying plants and trying to make the universe a better place. But now, after 3 long weeks floating in space with no power, they were all slowly dying. The problem had started when their main engine exploded without warning. One moment, they were traveling through space studying a new solar system, and the next moment, everything went dark. The backup power was only meant to last a few days, but they had stretched it for weeks by turning off everything except the air, makers and heaters. "We have maybe 2 days left," whispered Dr. Kella, the ship's science officer. Her voice was so weak it was hard to hear. "The air recyclers are failing." Thyra looked around at her crew. There were 12 of them total, and they were all her friends. She had known most of them since they were saplings back on their home world. Now she was watching them all fade away, and there was nothing she could do about it. "Send out the emergency signal," she told her communications officer. "Use all the power we have left. Maybe someone will hear us." The young officer's branches trembled as he worked. "Captain, if we use that much power for the signal, we'll only have 1 day of life. Support left." "Then we better hope someone is listening," Thyra said softly. The distress signal shot out into space in all directions. It was a simple message that said "help us" in dozens of different languages. The Vectorons had no idea that their call for help was about to change everything. Far away, on a human warship called the Iron Wolf, Lieutenant Commander Jake Mitchell was having a boring day. He was sitting in his captain's chair, drinking coffee and reading reports about space pirates and nearby systems. The Iron Wolf was on patrol duty, which meant they flew around looking for trouble, but hardly ever found any. Jake was a typical human officer. He was tough, smart, and had spent years fighting in small wars around the galaxy. He had short brown hair, serious eyes, and scars on his hands from old battles. Most aliens were scared of humans because Earth was known as a death world, a planet so dangerous that only the strongest creatures could survive there. Suddenly, the ship's communication system started beeping loudly. "Sir, we're getting a distress signal," called out Ensign Pete Walker from his station. "It's coming from about 6 light years away." Jake sat up straight. "What kind of signal?" "It's alien, sir. Looks like a research vessel. They're saying their engines are dead and they're running out of air." Major Lisa Hayes, Jake's second-in-command, walked over to look at the data. She was a smart woman who always followed the rules. "Sir, according to regulations, we should report this to headquarters first. They'll want to send a first contact team." Jake shook his head. "How long would that take?" "At least a week, maybe 2. "They'll be dead in 2 days," Jake said, standing up from his chair. "Pete, plot a course for that signal. Maximum speed." "Sir, are you sure about this?" Lisa asked. "We don't know anything about these aliens. They could be dangerous." Jake looked at her with determination in his eyes. "They're dying, Lisa. That's all I need to know." The Iron Wolf appeared out of nowhere like a metal predator emerging from the darkness. One second there was empty space, and the next second the massive human warship was floating next to the dying Star Whisper. The 2 ships couldn't have looked more different. The alien vessel was smooth and curved like a giant seashell, while the human ship was all sharp angles and weapon ports. Built for war, inside the Star Whisper, the Vectorans felt their hearts racing with fear. They had heard stories about humans, terrifying tales of a species that came from a world so deadly that it turned them into living weapons. According to galactic databases, humans were apex predators who could kill with their bare hands and never backed down from a fight. "They're coming aboard," whispered Dr. Keela, watching her sensors with trembling branches. 5 of them. Captain Thyra tried to stand up straight, but she was so weak she could barely move. "Everyone stay calm," she said, though her own voice was shaking. "Maybe they just want to help." The human boarding party moved through the alien ship like they owned the place. Chief Engineer Tom Rodriguez led the way, his heavy boots clanking on the crystal floors. He was a big man, with thick arms covered in tattoos, and he carried a toolbox that looked like it could fix anything. Behind him came 4 other humans, all wearing black uniforms and carrying equipment. The first thing that struck the Vectorans was how the humans moved. They walked with purpose, their heads turning constantly to scan for danger. Their eyes, those forward-facing predator eyes, missed nothing. Every step was calculated, every movement efficient. These weren't peaceful explorers like themselves. These were warriors. When the humans entered the main bridge, all 12 Vectorans pressed themselves against the walls, in terror. The humans looked exactly like the monsters from their nightmares, tall, muscular, with pale skin and sharp teeth that showed when they talked. But then something unexpected happened. Tom Rodriguez knelt down next to Captain Thyra and spoke in a gentle voice. "Hey there, it's okay. We got your distress call. We're here to help." He pulled out a small device and started scanning the air around them. His face grew serious as he read the results. "Your life support is barely working. You've got maybe 18 hours of breathable air left." Without waiting for permission, the humans spread out across the ship. Sergeant Kelly Brooks, a woman with short red hair, immediately went to the engine room and started pulling apart broken machinery. Her hands moved incredibly fast, and she seemed to understand the alien technology just by looking at it. Corporal Danny Johnson started, handing out small packages to the terrified "Food," he explained simply. "Modified for plant-based metabolism. It'll help keep your strength up." The Vectorans stared at the packages like they might explode. These humans, these supposed monsters, were giving them food and trying to fix their ship. It didn't make any sense. Dr. Kella was the first to try the human food. It tasted strange but filled her with energy she hadn't felt in weeks. "This is good," she said in amazement. Captain Thyra managed to activate her ship's translator. The device would convert her plant language into something the humans could understand. "Why?" she asked, her voice coming out as electronic words. "Why do you help us? Your species is known throughout the galaxy as dangerous killers." Lieutenant Commander Jake Mitchell had just arrived on the bridge. He was smaller than the other humans, but carried himself like a leader. When he heard Thyra's question, he smiled, but it wasn't a happy smile. It was the kind of smile that said he'd seen too much war. "We're dangerous to those who hurt innocent people," he said, looking directly at her with those intense human eyes. "But you're scientists, right? Explorers. That makes you friends in our book." Tom Rodriguez called out from where he was working, on a power converter. "Captain, their whole electrical system is fried. It's going to take at least 6 hours to get life support back to normal levels." "Then we work for 6 hours," Mitchell replied without hesitation. "Nobody dies on our watch." The Vectorans watched in growing amazement as the humans worked. These creatures who were supposed to be mindless killers were actually brilliant engineers and mechanics. They worked together like a machine, each one knowing exactly what the others needed without being told. Everything was going perfectly. The human engineers had been working for 4 hours straight, and the Star Whisper was finally coming back to life. Lights flickered on throughout the ship, the air recyclers hummed with renewed power, and the Vectorans were starting to look healthier as fresh. Oxygen filled their lungs. Tom Rodriguez wiped sweat from his forehead and grinned at Captain Thyra. "Your ship's going to be just fine." We've got your main power back online, and your engines should be ready for restart in about 2 more hours. Thyra felt hope blooming in her chest for the first time in weeks. These humans had literally saved her and her entire crew from certain death. She was about to thank them when every alarm on both ships started screaming at once. "Contact!" shouted Ensign Pete Walker from the Iron Wolf. Multiple ships dropping out of hyperspace. Lieutenant Commander Jake Mitchell rushed to his ship's bridge, leaving the repair work to his crew. What he saw on the main screen made his blood run cold. 6 enormous warships had appeared out of nowhere, surrounding both the human and Vectoran vessels. These weren't exploration ships or merchant vessels. These were pure instruments of war. The alien warships were massive, each one 3 times the size of the Iron Wolf. They were painted blood red with black symbols that looked like twisted claws. Their hulls bristled with weapons, plasma cannons, missile tubes, and energy weapons that could vaporize a smaller ship in seconds. "Those are hegemony battle cruisers," whispered Major Lisa Hayes, her face pale as she read the identification data. "The Draxian Empire's finest war machines." The Draxians were known throughout the galaxy as conquerors. They were a species of tall reptilian creatures who believed that might made right. For centuries, they had been building an empire by crushing anyone who stood in their way. They called themselves the Hegemony, claiming they brought order to the galaxy. But everyone knew they really just brought death and slavery. A harsh voice suddenly filled both ships as the lead Hegemony vessel opened communications. The voice belonged to Admiral Vex, the most feared military commander in Draxian space. His words came out like the growl of an angry beast. "Human vessel, you will surrender the Vectoran criminals immediately. They possess stolen Hegemony research data. You have 60 seconds to comply, or we will destroy you both." Jake felt his jaw clench with anger. He opened a channel to the Star Whisperer. "Captain Thyra, what's he talking about? What research data?" Thyra petals were trembling with fear, but her voice was steady. "Commander Mitchell, we discovered something terrible. The Hegemony has been lying to the entire galaxy for decades. We found proof that they've been suppressing peaceful contact protocols between different species." "What does that mean?" Jake asked, though he was starting to get a bad feeling about the answer. "It means they want war, not peace," Thyra explained. "Every time 2 species try to work together peacefully, the Hegemony finds a way to start a conflict between them. They make money selling weapons to both sides, and they get to expand their territory when everyone else is busy fighting." Jake's hands clenched into fists. He'd seen this kind of thing before in human history. Powerful groups that profited from keeping everyone else at war. "And you have proof of this?" "Complete records," Thyra confirmed. "Communications, battle plans, financial records, everything. If this information gets out, dozens of species will realize they've been manipulated into fighting each other for no reason." The countdown timer on Jake's screen showed 30 seconds remaining. Around them, the 6 Hegemony warships were moving into attack formation, their weapons powering up with an ominous red glow. Lieutenant Hayes was frantically running calculations on her tactical computer. "Sir, this is hopeless. Each one of those cruisers has more firepower than our entire ship. We're outgunned 50 to 1. We need to surrender and hope they let us live." Jake stared at the tactical display, studying the enemy formation. 6 massive warships against 1 human patrol vessel. By every logical calculation, this was suicide. Any sane commander would surrender immediately and hope for mercy. But Jake Mitchell wasn't just any commander. He was human, and humans had never been particularly good at accepting hopeless odds. He opened a channel to the Hegemony fleet, his voice calm and steady. "This is Commander Mitchell of the Earthship Iron Wolf. The Vectorans are peaceful scientists under our protection. I suggest you withdraw from this system immediately." Admiral Vex's laughter echoed through space like the sound of breaking glass. "One primitive ship against the might of the hegemony. Your pathetic species knows nothing of real warfare, human. We have been conquering star systems since before your planet learned to make fire. The alien admiral's voice turned deadly serious. This is your final warning. Surrender now, or be destroyed. The choice is yours. Jake looked around his bridge at his crew. They were all staring at him, waiting for orders. He could see the fear in their eyes, but also something else. Trust. They believed in him, even facing impossible odds. He smiled that same grim smile he'd shown Captain Thyra earlier. Admiral Vex, he said into the communications channel, you're about to get an education in human warfare. Let me show you what we learned growing up on a death world. The first volley of enemy fire lit up space like a deadly fireworks show. Massive plasma bolts and energy beams came screaming toward the Iron Wolf from all 6 hegemony warships. Admiral Vex was confident this would be over in seconds. No single ship could survive that much firepower, but Jake Mitchell wasn't planning to survive it. He was planning to win. All power to engines, he shouted. Take us straight at their flagship. The bridge crew stared at him like he'd lost his mind. Major Lisa Hayes grabbed her chair as the ship suddenly accelerated. Sir, you're flying us directly into their weapons. Exactly, Jake said with a wild grin. They're expecting us to run or hide behind the asteroid field. Instead, we're going to do what no sane species would ever do. We're going to attack. The Iron Wolf shot forward like a bullet, diving straight toward the massive hegemony fleet. The enemy's ships were so shocked by this suicidal move that their next volley went wide, missing the rapidly moving human vessel. Weapons Officer Danny Cooper, I want you to target their shield generators, Jake ordered. Amy Foster, plot us a course that keeps us moving. Never let them get a solid lock on us. What happened next would be talked about in military academies across the galaxy for centuries. The Iron Wolf moved through space like it was alive, spinning and rolling in patterns that seemed to defy the laws of physics. The ship twisted and dove between enemy fire with movements so precise they looked impossible. This was human combat, doctrine in action. While other species had learned to fight in the safe environments of their peaceful home worlds, humans had evolved on Earth, a planet that tried to kill everything on it every single day. They had learned to fight like cornered animals, with desperate creativity and absolute refusal to give up. Cooper unleashed the Iron Wolf's weapons with surgical precision. Every shot hit exactly where it was supposed to, finding weak points in alien shields that the enemy didn't even know existed. He had studied hegemony ship designs for years, looking for vulnerabilities that he hoped he'd never have to use. Direct hit on their lead cruiser's shield generator. Cooper shouted over the sound of alarms. Their port side is wide open. Amy Foster was performing miracles at the navigation station. She was plotting attack runs that used the enemy ship's own gravity fields against them, slingshotting the Iron Wolf around massive holes to avoid weapons fire. Her calculations were so complex that the ship's computer could barely keep up. Admiral Vex watched in growing horror as his perfectly organized fleet formation fell apart. How are they moving like that? He screamed at his tactical officer. Ships don't fly in those patterns. The truth was that human ships were built differently than alien vessels. Where other species designed ships for comfort and efficiency, humans built them for war. Every system on the Iron Wolf was designed to take punishment and keep fighting. The artificial gravity could be adjusted instantly to help with impossible maneuvers. The hull could take direct hits that would cripple other ships. But more than that, the human crew fought like their lives depended on it, because they did. Every person on that bridge knew that surrender meant death. Not just for them, but for the innocent Vectorans they were protecting. Target their weapons arrays, Jake shouted as the Iron Wolf rolled under a massive plasma blast. If they can't shoot, they can't win. The battle became a deadly dance. The 6 hegemony ships tried to surround the single human vessel, but the Iron Wolf refused to be trapped. It darted between them like a shark among whales, striking hard and fast before disappearing behind cover. One by one, the alien ships began to fall. The first cruiser lost power when Danny Cooper put 3 missiles directly into its main reactor. The second ship collided with the third when Amy Foster used their own momentum against them in a maneuver that should have been impossible. "They're fighting like demons," screamed the Hegemony communications officer. "Admiral, we need reinforcements." But Vex was too proud to call for help. He had 6 of the most powerful warships in the galaxy. How could he admit that one human patrol ship was destroying his entire fleet? The answer was simple. Humans didn't fight fair. They fought to win. The 4th enemy ship tried to ram the Iron Wolf, thinking they could destroy it in a suicide attack. Instead, Jake used the ship's superior maneuverability to dodge at the last second, causing the alien vessel to crash into an asteroid. The 5th ship surrendered when half its crew was unconscious from the constant spinning and diving needed to try to track the human ship. The alien crew simply wasn't built for this kind of intense combat. When the smoke cleared, 5 Hegemony warships were either destroyed or disabled. Only Admiral Vex's flagship remained. Limping away with its engines barely working, the Iron Wolf hung in space, battered and scarred but victorious. Jake looked at his crew. They were exhausted, some were injured, but they were all alive. And more importantly, the Vectorans were safe. The news spread through the galaxy faster than anyone thought possible. Within just 3 days, every civilized species in known space had heard the incredible story. A single human warship had faced 6 Hegemony battlecruisers, and one not just survived, actually one. At first, nobody believed it. The Hegemony had been the dominant military power for over 200 years. Their warships were legendary, their tactics proven in countless battles. How could one small patrol vessel from an unknown species possibly defeat them? But then the evidence started pouring in. The Vectorans released their research data freely across all communication networks, just as they had promised. The information was devastating. Decades of secret files showed exactly how the Hegemony had been manipulating peaceful species into fighting each other. The galaxy learned that the Hegemony had been starting wars on purpose. When 2 species tried to make peace, Hegemony agents would secretly attack both sides and blame the other. When trade agreements were being negotiated, mysterious accidents would happen to the negotiators. Every time someone tried to build bridges between different worlds, the Hegemony found a way to burn those bridges down. The reason was simple. War was profitable. The Hegemony sold weapons to everyone, played all sides against each other, and then moved in to claim territory when the fighting was over. They had built their empire on the bones of species who should have been friends. Dr. Kella, the Vector scientist, appeared on news broadcasts across dozens of worlds. Her flower-like face was serious as she explained what they had discovered. "We found communication records showing Hegemony agents deliberately sabotaging peace talks between the Zorian Republic and the Centauri Alliance. Both species fought a 30-year war because of lies. The reaction was immediate and explosive. Species that had been enemies for generations suddenly realized they had been played for fools. Ancient grudges evaporated overnight as the truth came out. The Zorians and Centaurians signed a peace treaty within a week, followed by trade agreements that made both civilizations richer than they had ever been. But the real shock came when other species started calling for help. The first distress call came from the peaceful garden worlds, a group of farming planets that were being invaded by Hegemony forces. The second came from a convoy of refugee ships fleeing a war zone. The third came from a mining colony that was being forced to work as slaves. All of them sent the same message. "Humans, please help us. We heard what you did for the Vectorans." Jake Mitchell found himself promoted to admiral almost overnight. Earth's government, realizing that humanity had accidentally become a major galactic power, started sending more ships. Within 2 months, there were 50 human vessels patrolling the galaxy's trouble spots. The Iron Wolf had become the flagship of the first human protection fleet. Jake stood on his bridge, watching a convoy of 12 refugee ships being escorted to safety by human destroyers. These weren't even human refugees. They were aliens from 6 different species, all fleeing hegemony oppression. Captain Thyra was visiting the human ship again. Her Star Whisper had been fully repaired and upgraded, with human technology, making it faster and safer than ever before. She stood next to Jake, watching the convoy through the main view screen. "I still don't understand," she said, her translator converting her plant language into words Jake could hear. "Commander Mitchell, why does your species fight so hard for strangers? These refugees aren't even human. You gain nothing by protecting them." Jake was quiet for a long moment, thinking about her question. Around them, the bridge crew was busy coordinating the convoy's protection. Lieutenant Hayes was tracking potential threats, while Danny Cooper kept the weapons ready just in case. They all worked with the same dedicated efficiency that had saved the Vectorans. "You want to know the truth?" Jake finally said. "Growing up on Earth teaches you something that other worlds can't. Our planet tried to kill us every single day. Storms, earthquakes, wild animals, diseases, volcanoes. We learned that if you don't help each other, everyone dies." He pointed to the refugee ships. "Those people out there are somebody's family. Somebody's children? How could we just ignore them and let them suffer?" Thyra's petals rustled with emotion. "But surely your government wants something in return. Territory, resources, trade agreements." Jake smiled. "Maybe some of the politicians do, but out here, it's simpler than that. We help because someone has to, and if not us, then who?" The convoy reached the safety of human-protected space without incident. The refugee ships scattered to new homes on friendly worlds, where they could rebuild their lives in peace. It was just another routine mission for the human protection fleet. But for those refugees, it was everything. Word of human actions continued to spread. The galaxy was changing in ways nobody had expected. Species that had been at war for centuries were making peace. Trade routes that had been closed for decades were reopening. Scientific research was being shared freely between worlds for the first time in history. The hegemony was still out there, still dangerous, but they were no longer the undisputed rulers of the galaxy. Every time they tried to start a new war or invade a peaceful world, human ships appeared to stop them. The bullies had finally met someone who would fight back. Admiral Vex, the hegemony commander who had fled from Jake's attack, sent a message to Earth's government demanding that humans stay out of hegemony territory. The human response was simple: stop oppressing innocent people, and we'll have no reason to interfere. Throughout the cosmos, peaceful beings looked up at the stars with hope for the first time in generations. Somewhere out there, humans were listening for calls for help, and when those calls came, the humans would answer, not for profit or glory, but simply because it was the right thing to do. The age of human guardianship had begun with a simple SOS signal from a dying alien ship, answered by people who refused to let evil triumph while they still drew breath.